Yes.
So on paper, you've made profit, but
The
there's no
profit
money
is not on the table just yet.
and you can't pay.
So how did you get over that then?
So it was pretty crazy. I went to the pawn shop and I sold all of my grandmother's jewelries that she had
Don't
gifted me. Yeah,
joke.
absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Hi, I'm Andrea Heng, and this is CNA's Money Talks podcast, where we shine the spotlight on a person who has found financial success, and we get to ask how exactly they got there. Today, we have someone very familiar to us. She's been profiled a lot in the media, wearing the many hats that she owns. She's mostly known as the founder and group CEO of the Parentinc, which is the company behind the Asian Parent website and app, as well as Mother's Work. You've been there, I'm sure, among many others. Her initial investment, a personal blog, and a $5 domain name registration back in 2007. This was back when she was studying and then working in New York City. Her first advertiser paid her $7,000 for this side hustle. Fast forward to 2023, the company made almost $40 million in revenue. She's also the co-founder of the Female Founders Network, a group of over 2,000 women founders across Asia. I'm listing just a handful of what she does, and we are very lucky to be squeezed into her busy schedule for a chat today. Her name is Roshni Mahtani Cheung, and welcome to the Money Talks, Roshni.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Roshni, there are two kinds of people, those who work for others and those who work for themselves. So tell us how you got started on an entrepreneurial journey. I mean, did you have that entrepreneurial gene all along?
So I always call myself the accidental entrepreneur.
Okay.
I never planned to be an entrepreneur. I wasn't even sure what it meant to be an entrepreneur. But when I look back at it, I think I've always had that instinct of seeing something that wasn't done great and saying, how can we make it better? So it was a sort of a mixture of a growth mindset as well as this hacker thing, which is like, wow, that could be solved quite easily, or I want to try to solve it. It all started off slightly, a little later than 2007, actually. It was around 2009. And I was living in New York City and I was working as a journalist. And I asked myself a couple of things. The first one is, do I really want to spend the rest of my life working for someone?
Okay.
And having to deal with deadlines, having to deal with editors rewriting my work and telling me this was just absolutely terrible.
The pain.
The pain. So I feel what each one of you do. And so there was a little bit of this push factor of like frustration working with people. But at the same time, the pull factor was that I have, traditional Asian parents, grew up in Singapore, and they really wanted me to have kids.
Okay.
It was like, they felt like my sole purpose in life was to give them grandchildren.
Okay.
And I wasn't even sure if I liked children. So it felt like unfamiliar territory. And I didn't have much younger cousins or anything. So I was like, wow, is this what I want for myself? Do I want to have a child? It's a big sacrifice. And I'm a very type A personality. So I was going, okay, let me try to babysit. Over the weekend. Can I tahan kids, right? Is it going to drive me crazy, right? And so that's when I said, okay, let me spend my weekends babysitting. And
how did that turn out? How did the first one turn out?
It was, in many ways, it was incredible because it made me realize that I do like children. I like how fascinating it is to watch them develop and the way they think. And you can see the synapses clicking when, things work for them.
Yeah.
And so it was very fascinating. But at the same time, I realized I was not ready for this journey.
Sure.
And it was very overwhelming.
How old were you then back then?
I was like 25.
Yeah, 25 in today's day and age, especially.
Exactly.
Who's ever ready for this?
So I was like, okay, no, I'm not ready for this journey. And the other thing that really hit me was how different Westerners and Asians parent their children.
Okay.
It boiled down to a few simple things. Like the first one is we generally do a lot of rice and a lot of noodles in our dishes. Whereas in the Western culture, that's not really the case. It's a lot more protein. And then the other thing was, wearing shoes when you come home.
The Asian in me is quivering a little bit.
Absolutely. So it was like a lot of these small little nuances. And I went, my gosh, is there an opportunity here to just zoom in on Asian parenting?
Oh.
Because if you look at all of Asia, we're more than half of the world's population. But yet our culture is not necessarily celebrated on the world stage.
When did you realize that this was something that you needed to go on? So you found that opportunity. Did you get any support for this? I mean, you were living in New York City.
So two things. The first one is they didn't necessarily have this expectation for me to be the breadwinner or to bring home the bacon or make a lot of money. So it was a case of, okay, as long as you are not taking money from anybody, you're self-sustaining, do whatever you want.
Okay.
So I don't think they really cared so much about,
just let her do her thing, see how it goes.
Exactly. And I think because, I had chosen to go down the path of being a writer, of being a journalist, they never expected me to be
So you were already on this alternative path to them.
I do remember this one phrase my parents told me and said, okay, do whatever you want as long as you don't go and borrow money from anybody.
That's pretty good advice, actually.
Yeah.
Right? And is that a piece of advice you carry to this day?
So yes and no, because of course, at the end of the day, I do think that it is important to borrow, right? And if you think about it, when you take venture capital investment, which is what I did, in a sense, while it is an investment, it's also borrowing.
Yeah.
Because you're telling people that I'm going to triple 10 times your investment, right?
But I need your money first.
I need your money first. Or when you go to a bank. So I don't think that was necessarily sound advice. However, I understand in the early days where they were going, try to make it work. Make sure that, you don't just build something and nobody's buying it.
Yeah.
Make sure it can be sustained.
Behind every successful business, there has to be a dark side. There must have been a dark moment in your life, in that career, in that journey, that really was the turning point for you. What was that for you?
Oh, there have been so many. So there was a point where I couldn't pay salaries. We were maybe about 10 or 11 of us at that point in time. And one of the things that I didn't realize early on was just because you're making a profit doesn't mean that you're cash flow positive. Because I was so young when I started this company and I didn't have as much experience, for me, if it was like, oh, the company's doing okay. We've got, people who are buying our services. I've kept my cost as low as it can be. So we're profitable on paper. And this was before I took on investments.
Okay.
And, I couldn't afford to pay salary because especially when you're in the media industry or in the publishing industry, you have to pay upfront costs for almost everything, whether it's an event or whether it's salaries and payroll and your OPEX and your rent.
Yeah.
However, your clients only pay you after 60 days, 90 days, 120 days.
Exactly.
So you consistently have a lot of accounts receivable.
Yes.
And at the same time, so you have no cash flow.
Yes,
So on
correct.
paper, you've made profit, but
The
there's
profit
no money.
is not on the table just yet.
And you can't pay.
So how did you get over that then?
So it was pretty crazy. I went to the pawn shop and I sold all of my grandmother's jewelries that she had
Don't
gifted me.
joke.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
So when I was 21, my grandma had given me a couple of diamond bracelets and jewelry.
So did grandma make noise?
I think mom was very shocked that I did it.
But you felt it was just the practical thing to do.
It was that practical thing to do because I was like, I cannot pay my employees late. So that's the one thing I've really loved, that during this whole journey, I've never ever paid any of our employees late.
Okay.
And it's been a long journey with lots of ups and downs. But for me, it was a case of this is my personal sacrifice. I want to do this. And so if it means I have to sell the last clothes off my back, I will do that.
That wasn't the only dramatic moment in your life. The Asian financial crisis hit your family pretty hard. You were just 15 then. I was around the same age when this hit as well. My dad lost his job. What was the first thing that went through your mind when your dad lost his business or lost his income, basically, and you were about to sit for your O-levels?
It was very dramatic for both my brother and myself. I think the shocking thing was we just didn't know. So my dad had put on a lot of pretense. And I think it was the typical Asian dad thing, which is, I'm not actually going to tell my family what's going on because I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to save the day. But this was beyond him, right? Because this was a whole economic system that was collapsing. And there was a lot of things that also changed at the same time. There was government laws changed around how long you could hold a property before you sold the property, etc. Right. It was just a domino effect of everything going wrong. I wish he had been upfront and honest with us, but we found out that my parents were going through bankruptcy by accident.
Oh.
And that was I think the hardest part And
Right.
also the most shocking part, because overnight you have to grow up, but you also have to understand like what is going on. So I remember this was around 26th or 27th of December, just after Boxing Day or so. I remember the doorbell ringing and someone came in and he said, he was very gruff and he said, move, I'm coming in. I said, oh, but my parents are not home. And he says, it's okay. I have like officially allowed to come in. And then I was like, what's going on here? And then I called up my mom and dad, and mom picked up the phone and she said, yeah, let them come in. And they were pasting these little stickers around all of our furniture. And so I was like, what's going on? And that was the first time I was finding out that my parents had lost everything.
But that's so heartbreaking though.
And so then mom's on the phone and she's like, okay, we've got to tell you something. And so she told me and my brother at that point. And then we realized those little stickers was ultimately, I think, the
repossession
repossession of your items.
Yeah.
What was surprising was we were actually really financially affluent before this. So in a sense, it was, having that country club membership, living in a nice big landed property, having like excesses of cars and holidays and stuff like that. And then suddenly going to, wow, we have nothing. But it was great because I think it brought me down to reality.
Okay.
I was living in a different world. So it was really like living in an ivory tower. I'll give you some examples.
Sure.
I did not know that not everybody had air conditioning at home. To me, it was just like, of course everybody had
because
air
it was
condition.
normal for you.
It was normal for me and it was normal for a lot of
So
people
then did
that
your
was around.
friends, your circle of friends also change then?
Yeah.
As a result? The
I
people
learned-
you hung out with had to change as well?
Yeah, I learned a lot about human nature. There were some people who refused to associate with me and my family anymore.
Wow.
They were like, we cannot mix with you because you guys are bankrupt and it will bring tarnish to our family name. And my parents prefer me not to talk to you. In fact, my boyfriend at that point in time, he actually dumped me as well.
How did that experience make you the way you are now, change you for the better to become this CEO you are today?
So when all of this happened to my family, I had no choice but to make it work somehow.
Sure.
So I think because my mom had never worked a day in her life before, so she really didn't know how to hold a job or even what it meant to have a resume. My dad was in depression, so he didn't work for a couple of years. And so this really forced my brother and me to step up. And we started doing part-time jobs and we started working. So it was the resilience as well as the hard work. So I would do things like give out flyers in MRT stations. I remember, knocking on doors and doing market research projects and surveys with people. I would do telemarketing, which taught me sales. So a lot of these first few jobs actually are now big part of my business models.
Yeah.
Because I do market research as a company and we're one of the leading market research agencies in the parenting domain.
So that has carried on till today.
Absolutely.
Did you know that was the thing that you needed to do, or it was accidental?
I've pivoted along the way, but I've always stayed true to the fact that I care about the parenting domain. So we've not gone out of the parenting domain. We focus on pregnancy. We focus on moms and dads, happy family. I truly believe that's how you change the world.
Yeah.
I could do anything. I could be writing about cosmetics or makeup or finance. But for me, it was fundamental that if we want to leave the world a better place, then it's all about the next generation.
How did all of this experience change the way you viewed money and handled money, treated money?
So there was a couple of things. The first one was that money is a very transitory concept. So it's there or it could not be there.
Okay.
So don't get hung up on the money itself,
Right.
but build something that's sustainable and on very strong, solid foundation.
How do you explain that to the average person if you were to teach this concept?
So I would say to the average person, ask yourself, are you doing this for short-term, quick-term, make money? Or actually, are you doing something that you're building foundations that could last for a very, very long time, generations after generations? So that's the first thing I would ask people. And it's okay to want to make quick money,
Sure.
but you need to be aware of it.
You need to be aware of the risks involved as well.
And you need to be aware that you're doing this for quick money and for what period of time. And this is not going to last you for a very long time.
So stay clear with what the goal is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I would say that would be the first thing. The second thing is with money, it's really about making sure your money is in many different assets as well. So for my dad, when I look at it, his money was pretty much in his business and it was in properties, a little bit in stocks, but he was over leveraged in multiple in each one of these things.
Right.
So he wasn't living within his means as well. So for myself, when I look at it, I mean, we as a family unit, we do many different types of investments. So I run my own business. My husband runs his own business, but we are also invested in a lot of different other companies as well. So between the two of us, I think we've invested in about 23 companies.
You said earlier, keep your eyes on cash and profit, no matter how dazzling your revenue may be. And this had something to do with the cash flow thing that you were talking about. Can you explain what this means in practical terms, this mantra?
Yeah, so keep your eyes on the cash, right, and profit, because at the end of the day, it's very easy to be dazzled by revenue. Actually, more than even the cash and your profit, I would say it's looking at your unit economics, which oftentimes is about looking at your gross margin.
Right.
So, you know, really how much are you going to take back after you take away all of your fixed, most important cost with regards to the product, right? And then you can figure out how much you're going to be spending on rent and people, etc. But if your unit economics doesn't work out, it doesn't matter how great your revenue is.
Yes.
So for example, if, you know, is your gross margin 60%, 70%, or is it just barely 1-2%? You could be $1 billion company with just a gross margin of 1%.
That's not going to mean a lot.
It's not very meaningful because that means with that 1%, you have to cover all the other cost. How much profit are you going to actually have at the end of the day?
Roshni, you meet many other entrepreneurs, many business owners in your various networks. I mean, you are basically into VCs as well. What are some of the common financial mistakes entrepreneurs tend to make that you've noticed?
So financial mistakes, I think, is the first one is it's really fundamental, which is don't scrimp on a lawyer.
Oh,
you need a good lawyer.
That's
so spend money.
Okay, I sense a story here.
Because I've invested in 23 different companies, right? And what horrifies me is sometimes when I read all the legal documents and people are just willing to sign away so many of their rights for so little investments. And or even in partnership contracts, they're selling away such important IP just because they want a brand logo. So I really think it's important to have a good lawyer. It's not, you don't have to go for a fancy lawyer. You just really need a good lawyer who truly understands what it means to run a small business.
Yeah.
It's to safeguard your interest, it's to safeguard the company's interest. Because it's very easy for us to say, oh, we're going to worry about this later. But no, contracts are binding.
Yes, exactly. You can't worry about it later because it's not going to change.
Exactly.
You talked about your husband, Darius, who's also an entrepreneur, 23 companies between the two of you. He's the founder and CEO of 99.co, so that's no secret. You hold similar jobs, essentially. What kinds of disagreements, though, do you guys have when it comes to money? Surely there must be many.
This is going to shock a lot of people, but in our 10 years of marriage, we have fought once.
No.
Yeah, we never fight. Yeah, we just get each other.
Right.
We have a lot of trust. I think because when we started dating each other, we were already CEOs.
Right.
And I think we found each other. When we found each other, we were already ourselves.
Right.
Our personalities were already determined. And I think he chose to get married to someone like me knowing this is the way she thinks.
Right.
And I chose to get married to him also knowing this is the way he thinks. So if that's a way a person thinks and behaves, I don't think people change.
Right.
So what's the use of fighting?
So do you guys have a joint account? How do you guys operate as a couple financially?
Absolutely. Everything's shared, whether it's our joint bank accounts, we have access to each other's emails, IDs, etc. So it's very interesting because I always laugh and say that my backup plan, if I were to accidentally, hit the bucket, right, and I can't operate and do my financial duties as a CEO, then really the best backup is Darius because he knows everything. So there are times where, for example, I may be sick and I might actually send him instead to interview a candidate instead of me. Because I'd be like, Darius, I'm dying. I've got a terrible migraine.
Please sit in for me.
Can you do the interview? And he'll be like, sure.
But it's only because you guys trust one another so much.
I know.
I want to talk about the younger generation. You have a daughter.
Yes.
The younger generation handles money quite differently from our time. They live in a very different era than you and I did. For example, there's debate now about whether kids should be given a debit card. You have a 9-year-old daughter. Was there an episode involving her and money that became a teachable moment?
So I think my daughter has grown up in a very unique situation where she's, again, surrounded by two entrepreneurial CEO type parents. So she's always been exposed to money, and she's always been exposed to investments, business, building businesses.
Right.
And I think just the conversations that we have at home generally revolve around businesses.
So every day is a teachable moment.
Every day is a teachable moment. She's been, she probably understands what liquidation preference is, and, all kinds of like weird terminologies because she hears us on all the conversations.
Wow.
And I've made it a point to have her around. So she's consistently exposed to everything.
Wow.
I think the most interesting thing that I did was, so my grandfather, when I was 9, he did a fantastic teachable moment. And my daughter just turned 9, so we've implemented the same thing, which is when I turned 9, my granddad allowed me to buy 3 stocks.
Wow.
And he said, because he didn't know how to bond with me.
Right,
So he
right.
was like, okay, to bond with my granddaughter, I'm going to teach her about the stock market because he loved the stock market.
Okay.
And it's those times when you would watch it on TV, right?
on the teletext.
Exactly.
Yeah, analog times.
And so that's how we bonded, right? And we would
Right.
watch the 3 stocks that I bought.
Yeah.
And, it was through his account, but it was ultimately my stocks.
Yeah.
And so we did the same thing just recently with my daughter where we said that, okay, now you've collected enough savings. We want you to buy 3 stocks. And you
Okay.
need to go and do research on the stocks and then come back to us and let us know what stocks you want to buy. And
So
we'll buy
has
it for
she
you.
made the purchase
Yeah,
yet?
she has.
Okay. You always hear about how rich and successful people say, money isn't everything. Some would argue that those who have it would find it easier to say that money isn't everything. What would you say to someone who is just making ends meet to improve their finances, that making that first step?
In my case, it's quite interesting, right? Because I had money, then I lost money, and then I made money again,
Yeah.
right? So I would agree that money isn't everything. Your health is much more important. Health over wealth any day, right? Whether it's mental health or whether it's just your physical health. However, for the person who's struggling and trying to make that first step, I would say that think of it in a sense of what is essential in your life and what is unessential. So an unessential thing could still feel like an essential thing. So for example, it would be about maybe going out for Friday night movies or, buying popcorn. It doesn't feel like a lot, or your Starbucks coffee.
Yeah.
The number of my friends who buy Starbucks 3 or 4 times a week, and I go, or smoking.
Yeah.
Can you save that $6 that you're buying for every single cup and do something else with it?
Yeah.
So it is possible, I think, especially if you're living in a country like Singapore, where, generally speaking, the government has done a decent job in making sure that our basics are met.
Yeah, but you're still surrounded constantly by things that are expensive.
Yeah.
It's a lifestyle that's...
It's a choice, and it's about making what seems to be hard choices, but starting with a little bit of an nest. Yeah. Because when you have at least $10,000 in disposable income, you can do a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you have to make $100,000, $200,000 in saving. Even $10,000 is enough to actually really, really radically change your life by exploring things.
Yeah.
And now with AI, starting companies is so much easier.
Yeah, starting anything is so easy now. And 10,000 it's a good start, I think. It's not as scary a number as it may seem.
Exactly.
Just the final one here. Indra Nui, she's the ex-CEO of PepsiCo. She has said that there's no such thing as balance. So what have you learned on this journey of being a wife, a multi-hatted boss, a mom, all of these things, and still wanting to go at 200 miles per hour?
It's not easy.
I bet.
However, I do think the most important thing is to be honest with yourself. What is it that you need? What is it that you want? So in this case, I have had to make sacrifices. I prioritize my business, I prioritize my child, and I prioritize my marriage. So for me, these are the, three most important things in my life. Everything else becomes sort of secondary.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means even disappointing people that you love or people around you.
Yeah.
So for example, there'll be times where a cousin will invite me for something like a wedding and I just won't turn up.
Yeah.
I'll send a present, but for me, it's, oh my gosh, getting dressed and then spending that 3 hours going for, a wedding or an anniversary dinner versus being able to sleep a little bit more or being able to just cuddle with my kid. So just being very conscious of the decision that you've made and what's your priority. And no one can have more than 3 priorities, I believe.
No, I think I was just going to say stop at 3 because I think that's already a lot to keep anyone busy.
Exactly.
And I think that's really the way to go. Any last words for our listeners, Roshni?
I would say that anyone who's thinking of starting a company, just do it.
Oh, wow. Have the courage to do it.
Just have the courage to do it. I think Singapore is an amazing ecosystem. There's so many grants available. It's an easy place to test something out. And it's okay if it doesn't work, but you will never know unless you've tried. So if you've been, having some thoughts, some ideas, just do it. Yeah. It's not that risky.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Roshni. I
Thank
really
you for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
I'm sure many listeners will find inspiration in what Roshni has just shared with us today. If you've got any comments or questions, not just for me, but for Roshni as well, we would love to hear it. You can send us a message. We are streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as well. Big credits to the team, of course. Crispino Robert, Tiffany Ang, Junaini Johari, Joanne Chan, Hanida Amin, and Saya Wind. I'm Andrea Heng. This has been the Money Talks podcast.